Hospital Porter's Pride and Dignity. Stop the New World Order. Welcome to Herpanwo TV and welcome to this another video which I've made a bit sooner than I expected. I had originally planned to make a video later in the week, but then, as the saying goes, something came up. Well, it's not so much that something came up, it's that I started thinking about things that had happened during the live stream. Now, if you remember what happened in the live stream, I did mention to a couple of people that they'd made points that I was going to talk about in more detail in the next comments reply video, but then I thought the amount of material that would be necessary to cover as a result of these comments and comments other people have made, just three people in particular, that it would be too much to just include as part of the comments reply video. It would be too much. It was actually, if you remember, it was a couple of people. Charles Unleashed, for example, he's a name I will mention because he did make a public comment about Carol Rosin, saying that she'd changed her story about meeting Werner von Braun and things like this. And I said, okay, I've not heard about this before. I'll look into it as best as I can and try and find a way to respond, although very often responding to these kinds of things is very difficult. It means a lot of research. You need to look into to find like a rebuttal to something that someone posts. So I thought, well, I'll cover it in the next live stream, but I thought, no, I better do it beforehand. I've been contacted by other people as well. I'm not going to mention names most of this time because some of this involves private correspondence. If any of the people I've been emailing or have emailed me wants to own up and in the comments section of this video, they can go ahead. I'm not going to name you. But I know one person in particular I don't think watches my videos, one of these people anyway, but not very much anyway. But we're in a bit of a strange situation now where I think we're dealing with the criticism of new ufology. Now, it's funny, the term new ufology, I've never heard that before, but it suddenly came into my head. And I've got a feeling probably at some point someone else will coin it, so I thought, well, I'd better get in there first and say it was my word. It was Ben's neologism that I invented. So when it goes into the Oxford English Dictionary, I'll be the one who first coined the phrase "new ufology." But it is like that, isn't it? It is kind of like something new, different, groundbreaking. Since 2017, we are in the era of new ufology. I think how you tell a new ufologist from an old ufologist is the new ones tend to use the term UAP more. But whatever you call it, I think you know what I mean by new ufology. But new ufology has received a lot of very harsh, very widespread criticism since its emergence. Some people, such as Mick West, have directly addressed the actual evidence as much as they can. But what I found is that more often than not, the kind of criticism that new ufology gets, and old ufology indeed as well, on top of that, tends to focus an awful lot on the individuals involved rather than the actual evidence for and against. And Mick West is an exception in that case because he actually very carefully avoids criticism of individuals. Now, I was actually, if you read Herpanwo Voice, you'll know this already because I've written a report there. But I went to a webinar, Mick West. He did like a webinar, and I was in the audience. And it was very interesting. It was about how do you... he didn't actually talk about anything specific. He says, what do you do if you have a friend or family member who's a conspiracy theorist? How do you talk them down off that woo-woo ledge, basically? And I thought, well, I'll go along here the other side of the story like I like to. And also I thought, well, if we're going to talk about people like this, then I'd like to be, one of us should be there. I should show the flag, so to speak. But I'll go into more details in the article. By the way, if you watch my channel and you don't read Herpanwo Voice, you're missing out on something, because a lot of my material is written, and you just little 5 or 6 minute reads. You can just go through them, and if you like the channel, you'll find a lot of interesting stuff there. Now, somebody wrote to me talking about Richard Dolan, and indeed this did come up in the live stream that Richard Dolan, firstly, has a bit of an unhealthy relationship with Colonel John Alexander. Now, this is new information that someone gave me, but the source was Erica Luke's video, which I discussed, her interview with Karen Dolan, Richard Dolan's ex-wife, and if that's the case, and again, this is just one source. This is just one source article, piece of material. It may not be true, but I mean, he's not someone I recommend being buddy with. It's somebody I wouldn't say ignore him and be nasty to him and hate on him. I wouldn't say that. No, I mean, he's a regular attendee at many UFO conferences. He seems to be doing the circuit, a bit like Richard Doty and Nick Pope, which will say a few things. But you know, his background in DARPA, the fact that he was basically monitoring John Hutchison in the early 1980s, his involvement with remote viewing, psychic warfare, so-called non-lethal weapons, and then suddenly now he suddenly wants to get in, he wants to sort of like lecture at UFO conferences and things. You know, I wouldn't refuse to attend a conference where John Alexander was speaking. I wouldn't tell organisers, you know, you shouldn't have that man at your conference. Get rid of him. He's evil. He's nasty. I wouldn't say that. But he's the kind of person, based on what I've seen of him, that I'd like to keep at arm's length. Listen, I wouldn't ignore. I'd listen to what he said. I'd be polite to him, but I wouldn't want to get. I wouldn't enter into any business deals with him, and things like that. I was actually in a bit of a situation a bit like this, which it does involve Nick Pope. I won't say any more than that because I can't prove it. It's the kind of thing I'll talk about privately with people, but would never say publicly because I've got no evidence. It involves a couple of people, including Nick Pope. You know, so that's basically Richard Dolan. You know, he strikes me as quite a streetwise guy. So I was quite surprised when I found out about this, if it's true. Another thing, Dolan's qualifications. Now, what qualifications does he claim to have, and what qualifications does he actually have? Well, it's a bit tricky to find out what he claims because his Wikipedia page is gone. He did have one. It mentioned his education, and this is another source document I found from another website, and I'll say more about that website in a minute, but it says this. Dolan's education is legitimate. He has an MA in history from the University of Rochester. That's in New York State, USA. His BA is from Alfred University, a small private university in New York. He has a certificate in political theory from Oxford University and was a Rhodes Scholar finalist. He says he's made a living since then as a self-employed business writer. And he publishes a lot of his own work, Keyhole Publishing. He publishes a lot of his own work, as I do. It's quite easy to do nowadays. In this sense, his academic qualifications are similar to Stanton Friedman, who has a master's degree in physics from the University of Chicago. Friedman brags about this with impunity. It has to be said that Dolan does not have a scientific education. He is strictly liberal arts. Dolan is much more low-key. He's obviously capable of earning a PhD. He just hasn't done it and has spurned academia. That's part of his persona, an iconoclastic scholar who's rejected the stilted halls of the Ivy League in order to concentrate on serious research. The Ivy League refers to the elite universities in the United States, like Oxbridge here, well, Oxford and Cambridge. He says he narrowly missed out as a Rhodes Scholarship because he managed to alienate the selection committee. Oh my God, did he waffle on about UFOs? In other words, he was academically qualified. The reason for his rejection was politics. People like us really like that. Here's someone who said no to the establishment and is searching for the truth in opposition to it. This really feeds into a worldview that most people are interested in the field. I don't know how you get a Rhodes Scholarship and how you don't. I mean, I know that lots of people who get Rhodes Scholarships often do very well in the future. They often rise to very high positions in their country. Usually former British imperial countries such as the United States, Australia, parts of Africa, places like that. But yeah, I've done a video about the Rhodes Mandela Trust actually, because I did 2 videos actually. I did one when Nelson Mandela died, yeah, when he really died. Yeah, okay, but then this same person actually then went on to write to me about Betty and Barney Hill. Now, Betty and Barney Hill, it's a very, very famous case. It came up in the live stream. Betty and Barney Hill are a couple from New Hampshire. In 1961, they were. I'm not going to be vague. Let me just get the actual summary of the case here for you, because I know the story, but I just don't want to get all the facts right. Yeah, this happened in 61. September the 19th, 1961, around 10:30 p.m. They were driving back to Portsmouth, New Hampshire, and they'd just been on holiday. They'd been to Niagara Falls, they'd been to Montreal, they'd basically been on a tour of Canada and that area. And they were just driving along at night. They'd be home within a couple of hours, and they had a remarkable experience. They started out, well, what they remember at first was that they observed what they thought was a shooting star, but it grew brighter, it started moving erratically and things like that. And it's eventually, well, the rest is history. They basically had what you could call a classic alien abduction. In fact, it's more than, I say classic alien abduction. It's often thought of to be the first ever alien abduction. And it set a kind of, skeptics will say it set a template for other fantasists in the future, which is unfair. But the fact is, the Hills were not the first alien abduction. They were the first one to be widely publicised because they took part in media interviews on the subject. Fact of the matter is, alien abduction goes back much further. In fact, it appears to be a perennial part of the human experience. Whatever your theories are on what causes it, whether it's real aliens or whether it's a hoax or whether it's some kind of psychological effect, whatever you call it, there's no doubt about it. It goes back probably well into prehistoric times. Maybe it's always been with us. But one of the features that's supposed to be a piece of evidence is the star map. Now, Betty actually had a conversation with the captain of the spaceship. She believes was the captain. They met these rather strange aliens. This person spoke to her in English, as they seem to be very good linguists. They either speak to you telepathically or they speak your own language, and said that, look, this is a map of the stars. This is where we go. We come from this place here, which was a star called Zeta Reticuli. I think it was. I don't think they said that. I think it was maybe identified from the map. But these are basically the lanes. These are like the space lanes where spaceships run between different planets. And there's your planet there. That's the star, and all the planets orbiting it are the planets of the solar system. Now, Dr. Simon, the psychologist, did various studies of the Hills, believed that they were sincere, but they basically were having a folie à deux. A shared delusion. So what's something, those crazy Swedish twins on the motorway, they're sometimes accused of having a folie à deux. But apparently Betty, under hypnotic regression, Betty redrew the map that this alien captain had shown her, apparently. And later on, someone called Marjorie Fish compared the map with a real map with the celestial sphere and worked out that it matched at first. This is the thing. But later on, apparently this was disproved because there was what it was, that the actual astronomical study that Marjorie Fish used was later found out to be incorrect. Because in 1990s, the European Hipparcos mission, that is actually a satellite, it's like a satellite telescope, rather like the Hubble, managed to basically reassess the position of 100,000 stars in the Milky Way, close to the Sun, and many turned out to be in what was previously thought to be, they were actually in different positions than what astronomers used to think. And there was 54 and 107 Piscium had been revealed to be variable stars, whereas Gliese 67 and Tor 1 Eridani are in fact close binaries. Then some stars discounted by Fish have turned out to be potential abodes for life after all. Well, how about that? Epsilon Eridani, that came much later. Yeah. But the Fish interpretation falls to pieces. This I'm reading now from this article this person sent me. At some point, Fish herself confirmed this. This was first pointed out in an article, Goodbye Zeta Reticuli, by Brett Holman, published in Fortean Times, of course, where else, in 2008. And the silence which has followed from supporters of the Hills account has been telling. Oh, dear. Well, I wonder if it has been silence or whether if there's some rebuttal out there, I haven't found it yet. So maybe it is silence. But it's obviously that would be true, wouldn't it? I mean, obviously, if the map was wrong, then it's not a real star map. You've got to accept that, yeah. But that's more than I know at this point. It's the thing about think about a map of space anyway. Think about it. A map of the surface of the Earth can be two-dimensional. It can be up on a piece of paper, as most maps are. When it comes to a map of space, it's more complicated because it's three-dimensional. I mean, this has come up in several episodes of Star Trek, and several other science fiction authors have tried to imagine this problem when they imagine in the future when we're regularly flying in space, we're going to need some way of creating three-dimensional maps. And because several books actually have several methods. For example, they extend. For example, they have like a baseline flat. It's usually the equator of the celestial sphere. That's regarded as the baseline for the third dimension, that is up and down. And then they have marks on various stars for where they stand below or above that. I've got books actually on astronomy which actually create three-dimensional maps in that way. If we have a sophisticated spacefaring civilization and we're regularly travelling around the Milky Way galaxy and beyond, we'll probably need something a bit more sophisticated than that. Probably something computer-based that can create actual three-dimensional models for which we're going to have to follow. But obviously, there's going to have to be different forms of navigation. So, for example, degrees. You won't believe they're not degrees of the compass. They'll probably be degrees around the celestial sphere equator, and then probably ascension degrees or descension degrees above or below that for where your spaceship has to go. Now, there's no sign of any of that on Betty Hill's map. It's got to be said. She said there were words of instructions, and there was what looked like text on it which you couldn't read. But I mean, this alone is not. And there's going to be more evidence about Betty Hill and Barney Hill. Now, Barney died in 1969, just a few years after the experience. But Betty lived on. And, in fact, she died in 2004. So she was quite old when she passed away. And in 1999, she did an interview which was filmed. And she told the exact same story she told before. She has every incentive. I mean, I've made this point many times. She and people like her have every incentive to come clean if they're making things up. There's every reason in the world for her simply to say, I made this whole thing up. There's all kinds of reasons. For example, it would reduce the amount of aggravation she'd be getting. It would be very lucrative, I fooled the world. That is a money spinner. There's a big dollar on that. I fooled the world. You've seen it many, many times. Look at the alien autopsy thing. Although I know there's another story behind that. Shut up, Colin Wilford. I am on your side on this. But, yeah, I mean, I know people are going to say they're frauds, and there's more on this, but do remember they had. This actually, I'll come back to this more general theme of saying everyone's a fraud, or lots of people are frauds later on. But they didn't really want publicity. I don't think they're the kind of people who wanted publicity. It's worth remembering, and I'm not going to pull a massive kind of white guilt trip or anything like that. From the live stream, I'm against this kind of thing. I'm against political correctness and things like this. But they were an interracial couple. Barney was black, she was white. In the early 1960s, that was unusual, very unusual in those days in America. And yeah, they did get some nastiness from people. They really, really did. I mean, it was probably more than you get today, because it was very, very often it was institutional. I mean, they used to go on holiday to places, and in some of the states, and their marriage was not recognised by law. Some hotels refused to allow them to stay in the same room. They had to get separate rooms. I mean, Kathleen Marden talked about this in her speech. Kathleen Marden's written a book with Stanton Friedman, I recommend as well. I saw Kathleen Marden at UFO Truth magazine. Okay, this is another article here called, this will make you laugh, Betty and Barney Hill's Bogus Journey. This is a skeptic one. You can tell this is a skeptic. I mean, there's a film called Bill and Ted's Bogus Journey. It's obviously based on that. It's a comedy, science fiction comedy. Here we go then, right. Now this apparently is to do with Nazis. Yeah, believe it or not, yes, the person who wrote to me and sent me this is going full Annie Jacobson on me. But here we go. The name's Betty and Barney Hill, a loving couple and residents of the fine town of Portsmouth, New Hampshire. The date 19th of September 1961. Their place, US Route 3, was a lonely country road. They were returning from a holiday in Canada, but little did they know that they would be returning to terror, because as they drove, they noticed a light moving erratically in the sky, and after a short time it began to trail the car. Barney pulled over and got out his binoculars to get a better look, whereupon he discovered it was it was a ship of some sort, and he could make out human-like shapes moving behind a row of portholes. That's true, yeah, there was actually square windows, not round ones. He kept repeating, "I don't believe it," to himself through his wife, though his wife, in the car and without binoculars, didn't know what he was talking about at the time, so she couldn't see it at the time. As the craft grew closer, Barney cried out something along the lines of, "They're going to get us!" And he hopped in the car and sped off at breakneck speed. The next thing the couple knew was 2 hours later, and they were only a short distance away from where they'd seen the craft, without memories. That is very common. That is the missing time thing. And that's very common among many, many experiences, including people who are just ordinary people. They don't have an existing interest in the subject. They just report this, and they're confused about it. In fact, there was an event not far from me near Farringdon. I actually went there. Did I film it? I don't think I should film it at some point. In the coming weeks, they would begin to experience nightmares of being abducted and physically examined by aliens, undergo intense hypnotic therapy, and become the most famous UFO-related celebrities of the modern era. Yeah, that's a skeptic talking, definitely. It definitely is. But yeah, the idea of nightmares is very the idea of things start coming back to you slowly. There's what is it? Hang on. You see, things come back to you slowly, bit by bit, very often. And people say, it's all from hypnotic regression. It's actually not all from hypnotic regression. But this idea that, it's different. What they say, celebrities. Well, it's different kinds of celebrities. There's good celebrities and there's bad celebrities, but both create problems. There were 2 books. There's been 2 books written about this. One was in 1966, not long afterwards. It's called An Interrupted Journey by John G. Fuller, which was adapted into the UFO Incident, which is a TV movie, which is actually very good. It's a very interesting film. There's a copy on YouTube which is actually quite low quality, unless it's been replaced with something better. But the UFO Incident stars James Earl Jones as Barney, and it's actually pretty good. And in Kathleen Marden, she worked with Stanton T. Friedman to produce the book Captured, which is really good. I do recommend that book. Kathleen Marden is actually Betty's niece. So there's a family. This is something she grew up with, is in her family. It really is. Now, similarity out. I'm reading the Wikipedia page. The similarity to Outer Limits. I'll come to that in a moment. Yeah. Yes. So I don't believe. I think what the skeptic is implying here, and this is a skeptic. It's from a website called the Iron Man Skeptic. I think that's what the name was. Sorry, I haven't got what was it called? I think it was the Iron Skeptic. I think it was called. The implication is that people deliberately fabricate these kinds of experiences for the benefits that come with having them, which is outrageous, quite frankly. It doesn't make any sense at all. There are a few people. Has anyone actually gained anything financially from this? Let me think. Whitley Strieber wrote a series of books, but he was already an established author. If anyone else can think of anyone who's really gained a huge amount from their experience like this, which more than they would have otherwise, I don't know. I doubt it. People say being famous is great. Well, people who are famous are very often not very happy with it. They get a bit annoyed when people recognise them and things like that. And they say a lot of famous people wish that they weren't famous. Sharon Stone is a good example. She's an actress She's actually quit acting now. She was big in the 80s and 90s. She was in films like Basic Instinct, A Different Loyalty, and she was a sex symbol. And she said, you know, everyone wants to be everyone who's not famous wants to be famous because they think fame will feed them. But when I became famous, I realised that I was feeding it, and so she retired into more. She returned to kind of more a more normal life. She's kind of gone back to normal life now. All right, so I'll carry on with this. This is one of the most well-known and historically important cases of alien abduction of all time. Mainly because it's all baloney. Oh, right. So that frames it well, doesn't it? However, it was well-televised baloney that brought UFO abductions and little grey men that Hills reported seeing into the mainstream of popular culture. Oh, and the little grey men. Oh, right. So it wasn't Close Encounters, was it? What's his name? Brian Dunning. So look, was it Betty and Barney Hill or was it Close Encounters skeptics? Because now you're giving out mixed messages. The little grey men. Apparently it was in the 60s with the fuss over Betty and Barney Hill. Brian Dunning says, "Oh, it never happened before Close Encounters." Both are wrong, by the way. Images of grey aliens can be found in cave paintings thousands of years old. Anyway, I'll carry on. What actually happened to the Hills that night? Hell if I know. I thought you just said it was all baloney. But I know what didn't happen. They were not, absolutely not, kidnapped by space aliens. Right, so this person thinks they can prove a negative, can you? The reason I say this is based on a number of things. After the abduction, there's a period of amnesia where the abductee remembers nothing out of the ordinary. Not quite. They very often what happens is after the abduction, they suddenly realise it's like 2 hours later. This happened to this couple at Farringdon, which I've never. I don't know have I made a video about it. I thought I went there with my camera. Okay. I wrote about it for UFO Truth magazine. That's for certain. Farringdon's in Oxfordshire, not far from where I live. And they suddenly realise it's 2 hours later, and they don't know what they've been doing for 2 hours. Usually they've been driving along a road, and suddenly realise it's 2 hours later. Or they turn up at a meeting and they're 2 hours late. But then very often things are not normal after that. They often experience post-abduction syndrome, as it's sometimes called. You know, nightmares, strange thoughts and feelings going through their head. Sometimes they have injuries on their body which they can't explain. Animals behave strangely towards them. You know, cats hiss, dogs bark, things like that. So that's not exactly true what that sentence says. Anyway, I'll carry on. Then after having some nightmares or partially recovered memories, implying that it was just a dream, the abductee undergoes months of intense hypnotherapy. Not always. Hypnotherapy is an option on the table that can be used in some cases. And I know a lot of some organisations won't touch it. Bufora won't have anything to do with it, but it can resolve benefits. Mary Rodwell and what she's written about hypnotherapy is very interesting. At the end of which they come to realise they were really kidnapped by space aliens. This is exactly how it happened in the Hill case. Well, firstly, that is how it happened in the Hill case, but that's not how it happens with every single abduction. And the Hills resemble many, many other people who've had similar experiences, and sometimes they remember them, sometimes they recover memory by other means. They never actually got around to telling the authoritative, complete version of the story until years after the incident happened. Oh, really? So, what, in the book, what about I've not read The Interrupted Journey, I have to say, but I've watched the movie it's based on, and it is actually a closed narrative. Anyway, what the average UFO enthusiast, oh, that word again, will try to leave out of any discussion of this case is that, from the starting line, Betty Hill was 100% certain she'd been abducted by aliens. That isn't all that surprising, since she was a paranormal and cult enthusiast herself. Was she? Kathleen never mentioned that. Well, where did you find that out? When you spend most of your free time reading books on UFO abductions, there's a rather good chance you'll end up thinking you were abducted yourself. Well, how about all the people? What about the people who are abducted by aliens who never read that kind of thing, which vastly outnumber those who do? In fact, I don't think is the proportion of people who it's a small minority who have a dedicated interest in this sort of thing. What proportion of abductees do they make up? Because the ones I've heard of mostly become interested in it as a result of their experience, not the other way around. Her husband, on the other hand, didn't think anything unusual had happened, and only after 6 months of therapy was he ready to admit he'd been taken aboard a spaceship. That's, if I remember, I read, what was it said in Captured? I do recommend reading Captured. I think it's not quite as simple as that. In the words of Dr. Simon, a prominent Boston psychiatrist that treated the Hills, people do not necessarily tell the factual truth while they are under hypnosis. All they tell is what they believe to be the truth. Was that all he said? Because his report was much longer, if I remember. It was his opinion that Betty Hill made the whole thing up, and only under hypnosis was she able to convince her husband that it had happened. All right. Well, I thought earlier you said they were sincere, but anyway. Fun side note, UFO enthusiasts claim that Dr. Simon, a fully trained and reputable mental health professional, made these statements because he was afraid of damaging his reputation by being associated with UFOs. Hogwash! There are plenty of ways for a person to distance themselves from UFOs that don't include flat-out saying your patients are lying. Well, I suggest, really, we'll tell that to Dr. John Mack when he was almost kicked out of... He was a Harvard Don who was almost kicked out onto the street, even though he was a tenured professor. Tell that to him. Well, you can't because he's dead, unfortunately, but I think this person doesn't really understand what kind of intellectual environment these people operate under. I mean, I could tell you a lot about Isabel Menzies-Lythe, who was a psychologist. She was a mind controller, basically, and she was like a violent skeptic. Maybe I'll talk about that in more detail in a future video. So let's look at some other interesting tidbits from the case. Betty Hill later brought a number of people out to the UFO landing site. None of the people saw anything except for Betty Hill, who claimed that a spacecraft and crew was sitting in the very centre of the area. She was just, for some advanced alien reason, the only one able to spot it. Again, that's it's not uncommon, actually, for certain people to be able to spot things and other people not. Bridget Barclay, for example, the way she describes her... She spotted a distinct structured saucer, very close, while driving along a busy road. No one, but did anyone else on the road see it? Obviously not. That's not uncommon. Barney Hill, for his part, described seeing a being inside the spacecraft with large wraparound eyes, which I think we can all agree on is a bit odd. Well, he never mentioned it in the original version of his story. In fact, he made this claim 12 days after a popular TV show, The Outer Limits, featured a character with the exact same features. The Outer Limits show was popular in the mid-60s, and this particular episode, The Bolero Shield, aired February the 10th, 1964. Hill never made any mention of such a creature in the 3 years between the incident and the airing of the show. Then, less than a fortnight after seeing it on TV, he claimed he'd seen it in 1961. Wraparound eyes were a pretty unique feature, and to the extent of my knowledge, has never been done anywhere else in science fiction. This was all discovered by a gentleman named Martin Kottmeyer as he sat watching TV one night, mind you. And just a sec. I know the image. The picture is actually... The picture of... In the Outer Limits series is actually an actor wearing a kind of rubber mask over the top half of his face with his bottom half done differently. And the eyes are kind of like... They're more sort of oval shaped and set wide apart. They're not really wrap around. They look very different to the drawing made by Barney Hill, and indeed the drawing depicted in the book and the descriptions in the book captured. And indeed, the TV movie they don't look anything like that. Now, this idea that somehow things on TV influence us, and these stories about alien encounters come from I've got another page I should have brought up before. Robert Taylor, UFO. Yeah, this idea that somehow everything that happens to us when we have these encounters, it's simply our brain processing things we saw on TV. This was Brian Dunning's belief about grey aliens, that it'd all been created by Steven Spielberg in Close Encounters of the Third Kind. When Robbie Graham, who actually contacted the production designer of that particular movie, said that was not the case. Robbie actually said, where did you get the idea for these grey aliens from? And this guy said, the production designer, whose name I can't remember, he said, I phoned up one of the people who sees them regularly. So Dunning's putting the cart before the horse there. But anyway, the Robert Taylor incident, right. This happened in Scotland in 1979. Robert Taylor, a forester. This is known as the Livingston incident or the Detchmont Woods encounter. Malcolm Robinson has talked about this. He turned up at a police station with really his clothes torn. I've actually seen... he went home. Sorry, he went home first, and then they called the police. I've seen the trousers. Actually, I mean, the holes are there's distinct. You can see distinctly something very strong has ripped those holes. These are like quite tough work trousers, and I've held them in my hands. I put my fingers through the holes. Something very strong, not just thorns, has created very large holes in these trousers. And he describes an encounter with several spherical objects, some of which he describes did have like hook-like appendages which grasped his trousers. Now, what happened was there was an episode of Doctor Who. Where is it? Hang on, where is it now? I mean, the skeptics say all kind of rubbishy things, and you wouldn't believe it. I mean, it was a mirage of Venus. I mean, you've got a good case when the skeptics come out with all kinds of amazing things. Let's see. I'll just find it. Robert Taylor. UFO. Now, this is interesting. Now, this was this? Where was it? I can't... But basically, what Robert Taylor was watching an episode of Doctor Who, apparently. He was watching an episode of Doctor Who. And, well, he apparently he never watched it normally, right? But the thing about it is, well, there was actually a strike on ITV. The ITV was actually off the air. He normally watched ITV, not BBC. But ITV was off the air, so he watched BBC instead. And there was an episode of Doctor Who on there, because normally he didn't watch Doctor Who, apparently. But apparently, just a few days earlier, there was an episode, which I haven't got the details of now, which I should have done, in which, let me just go to images, it may be there. In which there was an object that was quite similar in this particular video, in this particular episode of Doctor Who. And it just says here, UFO sighting investigated by the police. This is from 2019. This is actually on the anniversary here. I never met Robert Taylor. He died before then. But I know that people took a lot of interest in it. Malcolm Robinson and the Scottish UFO community took a huge amount of interest in this. And this interviews now Malcolm Robinson, a ufologist who's been investigating such the case. Was it David Clarke? It was somebody, I think it was 14 times again, where I read that it was basically, he blamed this episode of Doctor Who on Robert Taylor's entire encounter. And this is basically, our skeptic person here is blaming the Hills case on a TV show as well. No, on Barney Hill's depiction or discussion of the Hills case on this TV show, even though the Barney Hill's picture only vaguely resembles the creature on The Outer Limits. Anyway, the skeptic carries on. It's interesting also to note that in the episode the alien claims he cannot speak English, but he can understand a woman's speech by looking into her eyes. All creatures that have eyes, says the alien, have eyes that speak. That's something that comes up in Alien Contact. They either speak very well your own language, or they don't. Most of them don't actually speak at all, and it tends to be a form of telepathy. Barney Hill claimed to have seen disembodied eyes, or that he was able to speak to the aliens through their eyes. Well, again, that is a common feature of abductions. Sadly, this insane tale. Oh, that's a scientific word, isn't it? This I think is what you call the slur. If you watch my skeptic video, this mishmash of convoluted late night TV was eaten up by the UFO, wait for it, enthusiast community. Yes, UFO enthusiasts. This guy needs to get a thesaurus. Repetition of UFO enthusiast more than a couple of times, yeah. And the wraparound eyes, not entirely rare detail in many abduction cases. Before the Hills, abductions were relatively rare, They were going on. They just weren't talked about. They weren't publicised. And the wraparound eyes were totally absent from literature and cinema. Well, there was very little literature and cinema at all before the Hills case, except for this episode of The Outer Limits and a Japanese film called The Evil Brain from Outer Space. The special effect monsters for both of these features were made by the same man, who seemed to have a thing for crazy eyes. Anyway, before the Hills abduction, the wraparound eyes were rare and non-existent. No, they were not publicised, as I said. After their well-publicised adventures, people started coming out of the woodwork claiming both. Yeah, you see, the Hills publicity, the experience and what they reported, was a catalyst actually for others to speak out. And this is very, very common. It doesn't mean that the Hills just made the thing up and other people decided to make up the same thing. It just means that some people thought, blimey, I'm not the only one. Maybe I should tell a few more people about it. So there you have it. It's the case that sparked the phenomena of alien abductions, little grey aliens and crazy-looking eyes. No, it's not. It is possible that things really happened the way they... Is it possible that things really happened the way they said? Sure. Nothing's impossible. Well, you said it was baloney. You said you were sure it hadn't happened. You, Mr. Iron Skeptic, you asserted a negative claim, which is a fallacy. On the other hand, does it make any sense? Not even remotely. Did space people decide to use the publicity from this case as a starter pistol? The green light to start kidnapping people en masse? Oh, that is so ignorant. That is so naive. Betty and Barney Hill were not the first abductees. I've explained why. Or did the publicity from this case create other abductions in the same way that this case created from TV shows and books that Betty had read? I'm no statistician, but even I can see that the second option is the one that makes the most sense. Okay, you don't have to be a statistician to know that that's not the case. In the words of Robert Schaefer, Robert Schaefer was in the CSI, the Psychop. We can find all the major elements of contemporary UFO abductions in a 1930 comic adventure, Buck Rogers in the 21st Century. BC. Well, really? That's Buck Rogers. I've heard of Buck Rogers. I know this was a famous piece of. It was a comic, yeah, made into several movies and TV shows. But anyway, but no mention of Nazis there, so I'm not sure where the Nazis came from there. But anyway. This is another article. This is by someone called Carl Miller. Now, Carl Miller, I wonder if it's the Carl Miller. Oh, oops. Carl Miller and his twin brother, or I think they are, Carl Miller, yeah, he is a author and speaker and researcher at Demos. And he hangs around with this bloke... called Jamie Bartlett. I don't think they are actually brothers, but they look very similar. They're known as the 118 twins because they look just like them. I wonder if it's him. Is it him? It might be another Carl Miller. It's not an uncommon name. But this is a feigned abduction, the true story, the truth of the case of Betty and Barney Hill. Now, this is someone sent to me. Let me just find the email because I won't read it verbatim. Okay, I'm not going to read it verbatim, but I just wanted to. I just wanted to get an impression of the whole thing. Yeah, this is a connection to... This is apparently Ron Hubbard. Now, L. Ron Hubbard, of course, was the founder of Dianetics and Scientology. And apparently this is hypnosis by Ron Hubbard. This is a Ron Hubbard, L. Ron Hubbard, did a hypnotic regression on Betty and Barney Hill. I think that's what this person is claiming, this correspondent of mine. But when you actually read this is on this forum, it's by someone called Carl Miller, it's very, very different. What is actually his is actually not a hypnotic regression session. Believe it or not, it's actually... it's... Ooh, blimey, skeptics. I've always wanted to tell a skeptic this. This hypnotic regression session is actually a psychic medium seance. This is a medium. This is a medium called Jorge Oleguen, and the interlocutor Horatio Velmont, that's like the person in the circle who sort of introduces everyone and organises the circle. Entity that came to talk, L. Ron Hubbard, founder of Dianetics and Scientology. Now, they say an awful lot of things here. I won't go through this entire thing. But L. Ron Hubbard, coming through as a spirit, as a dead spirit from the spirit world, mentions that Barney Hill was involved in some kind of secret mission involving Alamogordo, which of course is Alamogordo is a secret laboratory where the atomic bomb was developed. So apparently this changed. This is a changed story that apparently came through hypnotic regression of Barney Hill, and actually it was Ron Hubbard coming through as a spirit, claiming that Barney Hill was involved in some kind of secret government experiment. Now, funny enough, I probably have a higher opinion of spiritualism and seances than my correspondent. However, I looked through this, and what I read here is not proof. Firstly, it is a seance, and unless things in seances can be proved independently, as they were with Helen Duncan, for example, and I'm afraid I'm not willing to accept this as evidence. And I think maybe, I don't know if my correspondent realised what they were actually sending me. They may have just looked at they may have given it a quick read, which is, we all do that up to a point. I mean, there's so much out there, you can't go through everything, and of course people will make mistakes. People will misjudge or misunderstand what they're being sent, and they'll pass it on without checking it properly. I do that all the time, and sometimes as a result you make a mistake. I think Liberace is going to start in a minute anyway. But I do recommend read Captured by Kathleen Marden and Stanton T. Friedman. Listen to the interview of Betty Hill, the 1999 interview of Betty Hill, an elderly Betty Hill. I mean, I don't have the information to disprove or I don't have the information at hand right now to disprove everything that people say in this particular video. And to do so would take a lot of effort on my part. But I know that there is another side to the story. Anyway, we move on to Travis Walton now. The same person actually wrote to me about Travis Walton. And they sent to me several things here. They sent to me, well, Travis Walton made up the story and failed a polygraph test. Now, Travis Walton has had several polygraph tests, and so I was keen to say if he failed one of them, fair enough. I know he passed one was inconclusive, and this one apparently he failed. But the link was actually a very short UFO, it was a very short YouTube clip of some kind of game show. It was like Jeremy Kyle or something. I don't know what it was. It was called The Truth About Alien Abduction Exposed. Travis Walton, The Truth About Alien Abduction Exposed. And that's a very brazen claim, isn't it? The truth about alien abduction exposed. If you're going to make a claim like that, you better have some evidence. Instead, they have like a 3-minute clip of some kind of gaudy, light entertainment primetime TV show where they say, "Oh, Travis, you failed the polygraph," or something like that. Again, as recaptured by Kathleen Marden, but also watch the book watch the documentary Travis. It's actually on not Netflix. It's on Amazon Prime at the moment. So if you watch it, you can get it on DVD as well. I mean, I think it's important to do, especially for the people who have been contacting me over this matter. You do need to look at both sides of the story. I try to do that, and you should do the same, because there is other sides to the story here. But anyway, this is funny. Someone sent this was actually in an article. I think it was actually in the Iron Skeptic article. It's called the Flake equation. It's taking the Mickey out of the Drake equation. And this is pretty spiteful stuff, but it's quite funny. This is typical skeptic idiocy here, but I'm going to read it because it's funny. Okay, the Flake equation is P equals WP times CR plus MI times TK times FO times FI times dt times au. It's a parody of the Drake equation. The Drake equation is something I discuss in my SETI video. If you want to check that out. But it's basically a way of calculating an estimate for the number of aliens that are in the Milky Way galaxy. It says here, P equals the world population times the fraction of people... Oh, sorry, Liberace started. He's doing his scales. He's not even playing a tune. Plus CR is the fraction of people who imagine an alien encounter because they're crazy or they want to feel special. You're not... I don't think that's not why people imagine alien encounters, if they even imagine them at all. Okay, this is the in the brackets of this equation, CR plus MI. The fraction of people who misinterpret a physical or physiological experience as an alien sighting. Right. Well, times TK, which is the probability they'll tell someone. 1 in 10 estimated. 7 billion world population. CR is 1 in 10,000. MI is 1 in 10,000. TK is 1 in 10. Okay, and this is TK times FO. FO is the average number of people they tell, which is 10. Okay, times FI, the average number of people each friend tells this first-hand account. FI is 10. Well, that's actually untrue. Both those are untrue. People who have these experiences don't tell 10 people. They usually tell fewer people than that. Times DT, that's 9 out of 10. The probability that any details not fitting the narrative will be revised or forgotten in retelling. Again, false. Times AU, which is 1 in 100. The fraction of people with the means and the motivation to share the story with a wider audience, blogs, forums, reporters. And the equal is 100,000. It says underneath, even with conservative guesses for the values of the variables, this suggests there must be a huge number of credible-sounding alien sightings out there available to anyone who wants to believe. Ooh. Well, I must remember to put a link to the Skeptic, my Skeptic article, I think, beneath this particular video in the description box. Or my Skeptic, my most recent Skeptic video, because I've made several Skeptic videos. The best one is the most recent one, Truth Seekers Northeast. Because honestly, what a load of rubbish. It's funny, but it's nonsense. It's typical of Skeptic spite and cruel humour and ignorance and their own will to believe. Okay, now one of the people who wrote to me, one of the people who's been corresponding with me, sent me a link to UFO Watchdog, and I kind of had a feeling they would. I'm just going to be very clever now. I'm going to try and screen share. Just one moment. I'll make sure I don't share anything embarrassing. All right. I've got no embarrassing tabs open, have I? No. Celebrity XXX bedroom cams is shut. That's good. Okay, so I'll just do this. Now, I've never done this before on a video, so I'll just do that now. And here we are, UFO Watchdog. Can you see that? Let's talk about this. Let's talk about this particular video a little bit. Okay, so I'll stop screen sharing. UFO Watchdog. Now, UFO Watchdog has come up before in my Jonathan Reed video, which I'll put a link to in the description box, although it's not on YouTube anymore. For reasons I can't go into now, I had to take it off YouTube. Now, this is a very old website, founded in 1997, updated a few times since then, not very often. But UFO Watchdog was created by Royce Myers, he's not actually a skeptic, but well, I'll explain what he's like. But anyway, this person sent me this UFO Watchdog link, and UFO Watchdog is well known. It's UFOWatchdog.com, very, very well known video website. Now, what's interesting, there's several interesting things about UFO Watchdog, and the first is its antiquity. Like I said, it's been around a long time. And if someone says to you, oh, that person's talking rubbish about someone in the UFO community, you can bet, I'm thinking of calling it Ben's Law. It's a bit like, Murphy's Law and Godwin's Law. Ben's Law states that every single person to be discredited by someone else in the UFO community, at some point the person doing the discrediting will send you a link to UFO Watchdog. They will. Very often it's one of their old pages from the late 90s, more than 20 years old. Now, despite its name, UFO Watchdog actually says nothing at all, very, very little about almost nothing about UFOs. UFOs are hardly mentioned in UFO Watchdog for some reason. So the first thing you do, and the first thing I recommend you do when you go there, if you've not been there before, go to the About tab. Have a listen to this. This is the About tab. UFO Watchdog was started by Royce Myers. Myers applied his investigative talents to unmasking many UFO and paranormal frauds. After nearly 10 years of investigative work, Myers decided to take a hiatus from the world of UFOs. He stated, "Yes, the rumour is true that I'm taking an extended, if not permanent, break from the nutty world of UFOs. While there is an endless supply of UFO crackpots and con artists, I simply don't have the time or the inclination to keep up on all of it. I'd rather spend my time out in the sun with my family and friends over a cold one and a barbecue. Why waste time on a field ripe with sheep that continually empower charlatans and lunatics by embracing with arms open wide any UFO tale for sale or used to indulge someone's deepest, most paranoid fantasy?" That puts you in your place, doesn't it? It puts me in my place. I mean, there's more. This is a quote from another article, right? "Apparently, exposing this fraud wasn't enough." This is referring to a UFO witness. "As some are still endorsing it, and the person has set up a new website and found some morons willing to hawk his wares. Amazing how some people just can't and won't face the evidence. The need to believe is a powerful thing." I've got to ask you this, right? Are those the words of a rational person? Are those the word of someone who is calm and scientifically minded and logical? I would say, I think these are the words of a fanatic. They're the words of someone who's angry, very bitter, and has a very low opinion of almost anyone in the UFO community apart from themselves. But yeah, this is the person who wrote those words is the one that you must trust to be objective with every other piece of content on their website, because they are the sole contributor to UFO Watchdog. What I've just described, it just insults the intellectual sovereignty of the reader. It's an insult to their intellectual sovereignty. This person is basically threatening you. They're saying, "I'm not going to use persuasion or logic to convince you of something if I think you believe the wrong thing. I'm literally going to insult you and, yes, threaten you. So denounce you or threaten, say I'm going to denounce you in this way if you don't agree with me." Let's have a look. This is quite interesting, actually. All right, I'll go screen share again. First of all, I will make sure. Again, I'm learning this actually because you've got to check what is actually on your monitor before you do this. There you go. Right. So what do we have here? We have a Hall of Shame and a Hall of Fame. So this is the two main segments of the website. So let's go to the Hall of Fame. And we have... it is being abducted. You see, there's a few things being abducted. Richard Dolan. I've already looked at the Richard Dolan page because that basically was the source of that little clip I talked about Richard Dolan. And it mentions here some good guys here. Richard Dolan, I know, of course. Don and Vicky Ecker. James Fox, of course, the filmmaker. Stanton T. Friedman, the late Stanton T. Friedman. Richard Hall. Now, Richard Hall, it's not Richard D. Hall. This is another Richard Hall. A guy from the 70s who was a ufologist. Robert Hastings, Bud Hopkins, J. Allen Hynek. I can agree with all of those, definitely. John Keel as well, yeah. George Knapp, Kevin Randall. Peter Robbins, obviously, I have issues with now in the recent years. Fife Symington's not a ufologist; he's a governor. He's a politician. He's the governor of Arizona, but he did speak out. Yeah, Jacques Vallée again. Good guys. These are good guys. So that's your Hall of Fame. Obviously he's not completely negative. He has people he admires. Oh, Mr. Myers, Royce Myers admires. Yes. Okay, so let's go back to the home page. Let's look at the Hall of Shame. Oh my goodness me. Okay, well, the first thing that strikes me about the Hall of Shame, it's an awful lot bigger than the Hall of Fame, isn't it? It's so much bigger that there's these three separate pages. When the Hall of Fame didn't even fill a single page. There we go. Oh my goodness me, alien autopsy. Well, Yeah, Art Bell, Stephen Bassett. Oh, leave Stephen Bassett alone. Who else? There's a few people like Ed Dames who's not really relevant anymore. A lot of this stuff's very old. Stephen Greer. Oh, don't you ever insult the man I've fallen in love with. Yes. James Gilliland. Oh my goodness me. All right, that's just one page. Here's H2O. Right. Paola Harris. Oh, Paola's someone, you know, as I said in the live stream, Paola and I have clashed over the feminism in ufology issue, but apart from that, I like her. I think she's lovely. She's great. She's got style, you know, she really has. And Linda Moulton Howe. Oh, get out of it, Linda Moulton. David Icke. Oh my goodness me. The International UFO Congress and Conference. Cal Korff. That's it. I thought he'd be on Cal Korff's side because Cal Korff is a skepper. That's all. Nancy Leader, I have to agree with, unfortunately. Jaime Masson. No, get out of it. Billy Meyer, I don't know much about. Sean David Morton. Oh, everyone's easy. Sean David Morton is just a kind of like he's like a pop figure of hate these days. I mean, I interviewed Sean actually for my 2016 anniversary for the alien interview thing. He was on Panama Radio, and I thought he was okay. I mean, I quite liked what a lot of he does. I haven't sort of looked into him in great detail, but I know he has been in jail. I know he's now sick. I know he was convicted of something. George Norrie. Oh, bloody heck, George Norrie too. Oh, look at this, see? The Morton files, you see? Reed, Morton. He's just sort of like, he is just kind of like the guy you love to hate. He's an easy piece of low-hanging fruit they all seem to go for. Does he deserve it? I don't know enough about him to say for sure, but I mean, I've not come across any information that makes him so bad. James Randi's in the Hall of Shame. Well, that's something. Michael Salla. Oh, dearie me. Oh, there's loads of others as well. Jill Tarter is nothing to do with UFOs. Jill Tarter is a SETI person. And here we have Fife Symington. So Fife Symington is in the Hall of Shame and the Hall of Fame. Anyway, that's enough of that. Eh? That's enough of that. Here we go. Okay, so that's UFO Watchdog. I really get very tired of these people. These people who appoint themselves the consciences of ufology. The people who strut around saying, I'm the only real ufologist and everyone else is substandard to me. Or it's kind of an adaptation of the everyone's a shill except me and Andrew Johnson kind of thing, you know. I mean, it's funny I mentioned Andrew Johnson. Andrew Johnson is, well, he is, I was going to say he's a good example. He's actually not the first example that will come to my mind, actually, because Andrew does do infighting. As you know, I've had a massive bust-up with him over Ian R. Crane. But he actually does, he doesn't just, believe it or not, there are certain people within the UFO paranormal, I'll just check, I've got the, just double checking the screensavers off. There are people within the UFO paranormal conspiracy theory community who literally do nothing else apart from infighting. They literally, that's their whole raison d'etre for being in this field. Andrew Johnson at least does other things. He has theses, he writes books, he produces material, videos, stuff like that, on the actual subjects that matter. He just put up a new video about something he wrote when he was a kid at school about UFOs. There are people far worse than him. I mean, they literally, there are people, like I say, all they do is infighting, nothing else. They are these self-appointed truth policemen who take it upon themselves to pontificate over the character of everyone else in the community, very often with little or no evidence. I mean, you always know when you've got one of these, when you have like, you always know when you come up with some of these people who just want to slag off other people, and very often they've got no reason, no evidence, other than they've had some kind of personal falling out. And the warning sign, tell you what the warning sign is. When they have a website called, say, the name John Smith or something, right? The truth about johnsmith.com or johnsmithexposed.com. Whenever you get people who set up websites with those names, you know they are bogus. You know they are attention seekers, they're shill shamers, they're just infighters, and and then they shouldn't be taken seriously. And you know what, when you click on those, the truth about or so and so exposed, all you're going to get is a pile of rhetoric. You're going to get an unprofessional, an ignorant, narrow-minded tirade against a particular person, with no attempt at any kind of calm, rational due process. You just know that. And I get them all the time. Sean David Morton is a good example of this. I mean, I've seen so many headlines about Sean David Morton. I haven't actually read any of the articles because they're all in this tone. And of course, there's Larry Warren, Darren Perks, Ben Fellows. I mean, the list goes on and on and on. And indeed, they've done it to me. If you look hard enough, you'll find people saying horrible things about me. I mean, well, Andrew, what was Andrew Johnson's video about me? It was an example of this kind of thing. There are people I don't like in this field, but I try to stay professional about it. I try to stay open-minded. I mean, this is another. I'm going to share you another. This is someone else actually wrote to me about. This was no, they didn't actually write to me. This was actually on a Facebook group. But again, I'm not going to name names. But this person says here about Luis Elizondo. I'm beginning to think that this man, Elizondo, is full of his own importance, much like Greer. You must realise Elizondo is trying to make a living out of this stuff, especially now he's on the outside, in other words, out of the Department of Defence. He's left the Pentagon, he's a civilian ufologist. And someone writes underneath, now you come on, you don't know that. And the first person replies, but it all seems extremely suspicious to me now. Sorry, that's what I think is going to emerge. And I have to wade in at this point, because this guy, he's not an unpleasant chap. I quite like him, actually. He's quite likeable. But he's just like one of these people who just... It's like... It just seems that the people like this who... They seem to regard ufology, especially new ufology, as some kind of demonic realm of hell, with like a river Styx around it. And none may pass except monsters and devils. So this person says, oh look, Luis Elizondo he's nasty. Jeremy Corbell. It's like again, you give out a list of names like this, and this person, not just this person, but lots of others will just say, they just say how horrible they are. And I wrote underneath here, I wrote in reply to this person, I said, has any ufologist ever been in the media, such as Elizondo has, who you don't think is trying to make a living and is just extremely suspicious to me? I just asked that. And I said, I carry on here. I'm just asking because I've noticed that your assessment of ufologists and paranormalists is so bleak and cynical. It's as if the subject is surrounded by a border across which only devils may pass. And we have a conversation which is actually quite good natured. Like we do get on quite well. I just think this person is. It's just very. I tackle him on a few factual issues as well, which I won't bring up here because that's not what that video's about. It just seems when people do this, like all the people who've been writing to me about this sort of thing, it feels just if you're like a skeptic and you believe that there's nothing to UFOs. UFOs are all nonsense, and they're all seagulls and things like that, and big schools of fish and things like that. And then you look at the subjects of the people who are promoting it, and you see them as a cluster of liars and deceivers and avaricious blackguards, con men, like Myers does on his website. Don't you think that's just a little bit convenient? Don't you ask yourself if you're being a little bit intellectually lazy? There's a song by Peter Gabriel, and it's on the So album. It's called That Voice Again, and it contains a lyric. The lyrics go, I won't try and sing it, I'll just say it. I'm hearing right and wrong so clearly, there must be more than this. And if you are hearing right and wrong so clearly, and everything seems to be black and white, and there's this group of people who are all wonderful, they're all crusaders for truth and justice and knowledge. On the other side, there's these people who are essentially kind of like evil chicken fuckers from hell. Then you've got to ask yourself if is that realistic? Are you being realistic? This is why I suggested we have a tribunal for things like this. And I'm going to put links in the show notes, in the description box. Links in the description box, which will tell you about the videos and articles I've made about this, my idea for a tribunal. Basically, we set up our own independent tribunal in which this is done. It's sorted out according to rules. So we do away with this finger pointing. I mean, it's this incredible, this medieval justice that our community has. I mean, it literally is ordeal by hashtag, isn't it? We instead start behaving as civilized people. That's what I'm asking. That's what I'm simply suggesting. And I hope you'll join me in this. And I asked the people who've been corresponding with me, okay, if you really do believe what you're suggesting, then you may be right. The people you are denouncing could be as guilty as you say they are. But I ask you two things. I just want to make two requests of you. Firstly, look at the other side of the look at the other side of the story. Watch the documentary Travellers. Read Captured, Kathleen Marden's book. You know, you can friend Kathleen on Facebook. She's very sort of like approachable, and talk to her about it. Watch her lectures about her auntie. She grew up with this. People like her could have done a lot better financially and socially with just living a normal life, but they chose instead to speak out about this. The second thing I ask of you is think about my idea for a tribunal. Think about the possibility that we could at some point organise tribunals according to rules which we all agree to beforehand, and then people can come across, they can have their say, the accused can defend themselves properly, and there's a judge and there's a jury. I've actually suggested ideas for this in the videos. I've done like 4 tribunal videos now. I've done about 3 tribunal articles. Do watch those videos. Also go to Hapanmo Voice and follow my blog with the written material. There's written material in there I don't cover in my videos. And there's actually one more thing I've thought of, which is a request to you. A third thing, the people who disagree with me. There's nothing I really want more than to have a discussion about the factual elements of all the cases that I've just talked about in this video and more. A factual discussion which specifically avoids, as one of its ground rules, the ad hominem attacks that I've been complaining about. I'd really love to have that. And you know what? It's hardly ever happened. It's hardly ever happened in my life, but it's nothing I'd like more. If you're a skeptic and you think I'm talking rubbish, there's nothing I'd like better than for you to come and explain to me why I'm talking rubbish without calling me a cheat, a charlatan, a lunatic, and what's the other word? Sheep empowering con men or anything like that. So I wonder if you can do that. And as Liberace plays us out, I'd like to just say thank you very much. I appreciate the people who've been corresponding with me on these matters, because I think they're good people. They're people I get on with. There's people I've been writing to on a polite manner. I hope our polite dialogue and civil dialogue will continue on this subject. And yeah, but do bear in mind what I've said. This is my reply. This is what which is now an hour and a quarter or more now I've been doing this. This is the reply this is what I couldn't really fit into the next comment reply video, could I? There's just too much here. There's too much to talk about. And I myself will endeavour to try to get to the bottom of the points you've raised. And if it turns out you're right, and these people really are the depths of evil, I'll admit it. I'll admit that I was wrong. Thank you all of you for watching Hapanwo TV. Hospital Porters, Pride and Dignity. Stop the New World Order.